Hello and welcome to AllInMotion. I am your host, Jake. Welcome to episode 17, My Deployment to Iraq, featuring Master Sergeant Kwan Martin. You might all remember Master Sergeant Martin. He appeared here on AllInMotion before on episode 6, being a veteran for Veterans Day. So thank you again, Master Sergeant, for your time and for coming back, and thank you all for tuning in. Master Sergeant Martin is a good friend, and I served with him in the military. I just want to pause for a second. This episode is very powerful, and by far one of the most powerful episodes and intense that we've ever done on AllInMotion. So again, Master Sergeant Martin speaks about his deployment to Iraq, and goes into detail about the different things that happened, the before, the middle, and then towards the end when they came back home. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Master Sergeant Kwan Martin.
Yo, how's it going?
Master Martin, how are we doing?
Hey, another day.
This episode is part 2, but another episode with you, and it's going into your deployment to Iraq. And we'll start with when and where were you when you were deployed to Iraq that you found out you were going to be deployed to Iraq?
That was like 2000. Honestly, 2003, we were just pulling out of Bosnia. And there was rumors, you know how the military, starts rumors. But there was rumors in 2003 that we were possibly going to be deployed to Iraq. And keep in mind, at that time, the Iraqi Freedom War hadn't started until 2004. So things are starting to gear up.
What was the, your rank in unit at the time, after you found out you were deploying, where were you with? What rank were you?
Before we left to go to Iraq, I was a staff sergeant.
Okay.
Bradley commander. And
so you said you had rumors about in Bosnia. What were you? What was going through your head, and how did it make you feel that you're like, I'm going to Iraq? Because this is after 9/11, obviously.
There was a lot, because at the time I had my three older kids were, let's see, my oldest son in 2003 was, three. Well, no, he was 4. My daughter was, actually he was 5. My daughter was 2 or 3, and my youngest son was just a little bit over 1. And, just thinking about them at home, it's like, wow, I missed a lot of their lives, back then. That was the biggest thing that's going through my mind. I wasn't scared to go to battle, because that's what I joined the infantry for. But I was scared a little bit. If anybody tells you they're not scared to go to war, they're lying.
Right.
But I wasn't thinking about that at the time. I was thinking about the family. How am I gonna tell them this? And I knew they would be supportive of it. I was worried about my mom and dad. My dad at the time was dealing with diabetes. He actually had been a diabetic since he was like teenagers, but hard-working man. He didn't let that stop him. But my mom and dad, I knew they were worried about it, and I was like, how am I gonna tell them, hey, I'm shipping off to Iraq? After all the other stuff, that's been going on. So yeah, it was a lot going through my head.
And that's awesome. And that walks right into the next question, and you already pretty much answered it. But how did your family take it when you found out that you were going to deploy to Iraq?
It was silence. My brothers and sisters, my mom and dad, just like, oh wow. And looking at the media and the news, they were showing a lot of what was going on over there and the different fights and They always have how many soldiers are being killed a day, and how they strive on that. But there was a lot of silence. My immediate immediate family was very religious. So it's like we're praying,
Right.
and I never really worried about that. I always walk in life and say, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, and I still live by that motto today. But the hardest part was leaving family, leaving my kids. For 18 months we were gone. And prior to that 18 months, remember, less than a year and a half, we were in Bosnia for 15 months for the whole duration of the deployment. 15 months. So I come home for like a year and a half, and plus you're doing extended duty when you're home. So that's the way it goes.
And just interviewed Sergeant Org yesterday about that, and we were speaking about this. Is kind of we'll just jumping in. I want to make sure the audience understands this point that when the Marines deploy, they might deploy more. They only deploy for 6 months.
Yeah.
And he made a point.
Air Force.
He made a point when these guys were over there. They were 3 months into their deployment. You guys still had, if I do the math right, 9 months left.
and that's a bone crush.
No, but that's crazy.
Yeah. Because and it's depressing, because while you're there, you see multiple units come in and leave, and you're still there.
But in context, though, the audience, they understand, not so much Air Force and the Navy, but the Marines, they do deploy more, but they don't deploy as long as the Army.
Right.
That's the distinction, right?
Yeah. And it depends. Sometimes they don't deploy more, but because their numbers are very much lower than the Army manifest. Marines are there's not that many of them, so they have to do that to complete the mission. So keep that in mind.
Right.
But,
now we're being deployed. You're being deployed, and speaking to Sergeant Org, I'm laughing just because of
it's my man.
It'll get to my next name, Poppy, but you guys trained at Fort Camp Shelby, right?
Yep.
Can you tell I'm laughing because of my next point, my next question, and you're gonna laugh. You guys ended up on tanks, but I'm not there yet. What was the training like at Camp Shelby and then Fort Irwin, so they can understand the audience?
Honestly, the training was much harder than the actual deployment, and it's designed that way. They're trying to set you up for failure. They're trying to break you. So keep that in mind. You're limited on sleep. You're doing practice missions back to back, and they're just picking you alive on just nitpicking. Everything you do is like, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Eventually,
So the audience understands. You first go to Camp Shelby for the first part of the training, correct?
Yep.
And what was that part?
That part was basically for us weapons qual. Knowing how to operate your equipment, something
so
simple.
M16, M4, gas mask. You have to go to the gas chamber again?
No.
Oh, good.
Bradley qualifications. You start Bradley tables. It's you're moving from the time it starts until the time it ends, and that could be 2 to 3 weeks long, depending on how well people qualify or how quick people qualify. There's a lot of bolos. People have to go back and redo things, and while you're waiting on them to complete their part of their qualifications, you're doing other details such as loading up ammo and things like that. It's a pain. You're doing Bradley maintenance because those things need to be maintained. Every hour operation, you spend about 4 hours repairing and
this is all at Camp Shelby.
Yeah.
And explain to the audience, you were there at Camp Shelby for how long? If you can remember.
Gosh. I think we got there in 2005 in January, and we were there until I believe April or May of 2005. So
and then you go to Fort Irwin in California.
Fort Irwin for 3 weeks.
God, that's so crazy. So what was the point of going to Fort Irwin? So
that was desert training. Although Mississippi was just as hot.
But it's a different type of heat, though, right?
Yeah, it's a dry heat.
In California, yeah. But it's hot, and it's hot. What is that? They call that area similar to Death Valley, right?
Yeah, it's not too far from Death Valley. It's very hot, very dry. But again, it was just to put some fatigue in everybody, and you're actually put in a situation. And honestly, a lot of people think they hate Fort Irwin, but it was good training out there because they had some real good missions set up, almost live missions. The only issue is that sometimes the cadre that they have out there are not familiar with the equipment that you may be operating, like the Bradley.
So how do you that kind of heat? You're talking about like an average of 110 degrees when y'all, because this is May.
If it was 110 degrees outside, inside the track, you're talking probably about 130, 140.
And people, can you explain the Bradley fighting vehicle? People don't know what that is. Most people don't. It's similar to a tank, an A1.
It's similar to a tank, but much smaller, much lighter. Maneuverability is a lot quicker. The main gun is a 25 millimeter chain gun. Then you have a coax.
And that fires 2 different type of rounds, correct?
It fires an HE, high explosive, and an armored piercing round.
And you have a 240, right?
And about 2 fires a 7.62. In the civilian world, a 308 round, fully automatic. That is operated through a sort of like a remote system, because inside your turret you have a yoke and a trigger, and you got your weapon systems that you pull up, and your reticles in the eyepiece.
And that, we'll get into reactive armor and all that in a minute.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you're done training. How much time after? Because we just want to make sure we're timeline and we're tracking. Make sure the audience is and we'll stay in the proper timeline. After leaving Fort Irwin, and you're there for about a month, correct?
Yeah.
After that, how much time after leaving did you have then to go? You obviously gave time to go home with family, right? Prior to leaving Fort Irwin, before deploying to?
We weren't allowed to go home, but they gave us leave.
I think when I came over a replacement, I think it was the same thing.
Yeah.
So you fly out, you have time with your family, you fly out, and we're talking about May or June, right? Or June 2005.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And you go over and you land in Kuwait.
Yep.
And that leads me to the next. And so people in the audience, Sergeant Work did a good job with this, but I want to hear everybody's perspective on this. Audience doesn't understand. You went into a little detail about it in California, but why did the U.S. military, why do we climatize in Kuwait before we go to Iraq? I think that's the biggest thing, and correct me if I'm wrong. Or is it just in preparation to go, or do you think part of it is a combination of different things?
It's a combination of different things. Climatizing is one of it, but that's where all your equipment is flown into. That's where you do your final PCCs and PCIs.
What are those?
Pre-combat checks, combat inspections. You make sure everything is up to par. You also get an intel dump on the area that you're getting ready to go into. You're getting an intel dump on what's been going on, the activity, things like that.
So it's almost in the terms, it's for the audience to understand, it's staging, basically.
Yes, it's a staging point. There we actually modified our Bradleys because we.
And if you don't mind, maybe this is a good point, maybe to let the audience know what you were in. Did you modify them one country, or did you modify them prior in Kuwait?
We modified them both in Kuwait and adjusted things once we got in.
We'll get to the later part, because I know what you did later. But in Kuwait, what did you do to modify the Bradley?
Reactive armor was one of them.
And what's reactive armor on a Bradley?
Reactive armor is basically, let's see if I can explain this. If you know what a cinder block is, it's about the size of a cinder block, a little bit smaller. It actually has explosives inside of a metal box.
You think it's like plastic or C4, something similar to that?
It's C4 inside of a plastic box.
Okay.
And basically what it does is when a round penetrates that box, the explosive charge inside either disintegrates that round or diverts it, so it doesn't pierce through the hull of your vehicle. Each block is about 100 pounds, 80 to 100 pounds, depending on where you're putting them. And there's multiple panels on a vehicle. So, for Bradley, you're talking an extra, I think, close to 3,000 pounds.
Just on reactive armor.
Yeah.
Now, does that slows the speed down, I would assume, right? It
slows it down. It does. Yeah. And with that, of course, you got more maintenance now because you're putting stress on that vehicle.
Okay. So, when was it when you were in Kuwait? You're setting this? I mean, how long were you in Kuwait?
We were in Kuwait for, I believe, close to 3 weeks. I'll never forget, we landed in Kuwait. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, their time. And they opened the door to the plane. We walked off, and it felt like it was raining. It wasn't raining. It was so humid. Humidity had to be at least 100%, and probably about 110 degrees.
Do you remember the tents we stayed in when you landed there?
Yep.
And you had the cots?
Yep.
You didn't have a lot of room in those tents.
No, you didn't have. I got pictures. You don't have a lot of room. Air conditions are the size of a transfer truck. You have at least for, let's say, those tents were probably about 25 by 50 yards.
And wouldn't you say that Kuwait compared to Iraq is more desert? In my opinion,
Kuwait was definitely
more desert than Iraq, right?
Well,
When I was there,
you got to look at it this way: when we're in Kuwait, Kuwait is a smaller country, but we weren't in the city. We weren't in the main towns in Kuwait, so to speak. We're on a military base. In Iraq, we were more staged in by the Euphrates, where there's more vegetation. At least where we were in Ramadi. At least where we were in Ramadi. We were hit with more vegetation there because of the water from the Euphrates. In Kuwait, you don't have that. And, of course, there's a lot more desert. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of dead space in Iraq. Most people didn't see it because we didn't go out that far. There was no activity. There was no reason to go there.
All right. So you're there. You have your mission. And before you left Kuwait, did you know where you were actually going to go? Before we get into flying, did you know?
Yeah, we knew we were in a company. You got 4 units or platoons, and each platoon knew where they were going, and we knew prior to getting to Kuwait pretty much what we were going to be doing. But we closed the chapter on that when we got to Kuwait.
Okay. Now, transitioning in from Kuwait to our...
And before you go, when we got to Kuwait, we didn't know that we were going to be, some of the guys are going to be manning tanks.
No, stop. I'm gonna get there.
So,
I just
wanted to clarify.
No, I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
Because this is the point I need the audience, because I know you're gonna give a good explanation. You flew into, I call it TQ, and you call it, what's the actual proper name of TQ?
Al-Decatum.
Okay. Now, so when you flew in there, and I looked it up, I did some research, and I'm not a pilot. No offense, you're not a pilot. But anybody that was in from 2004 to 2008, 2010, Iraq or Afghanistan, mainly Iraq, what is it when you left Kuwait, when you get in near probably, 2-3 miles from the airfield, what is a combat landing?
Oh, good point. So first of all, you packed in the C-130s like sardines. I mean, they're not your American Airlines, United Airlines.
They're no commercial
Delta.
airlines.
No, this is, you're sitting on a web seat, fiber web seat, and there's no. You're sitting back to back and face to face to your buddy in that plane, and your knees are like interlocked. There's no room to stretch your legs or nothing. So for 2.5, 3 hours, no air condition. For 2.5, 3 hours, you're sitting in a plane, and it is hot. Everybody's sweating. Everybody's soaked. And about, I'd say, 30 minutes out, you start doing this downward spiral. So basically what a combat land is they will do a downward spiral at a pretty good descent until they get to the runway, and then they'll land. Basically, that's to deter any type of anti-aircraft weapons and things like that. So that's what a combat landing basically
And the
is.
pilot nosedives the plane, basically,
Yes.
to avoid fire.
Yes. Nosedive in a spiral, not just straight down, but in a spiral. And people get sick, and we had basically 5 tons of armor on the back that we were thrown in and taken over to Habanea, which is only maybe like 2 miles away.
So you arrive at Habanea.
So we arrived at Habanero.
And now I want to make this distinction because this is not that I'm not as smart as you, but I remember.
Yeah, whatever.
Sergeant Orwig brought up. He says we trained for 6 months. To your point.
Yep.
On a Bradley fighting vehicle.
Yep.
But you end up on tanks. Can you let the audience know why in the hell would you end up on tanks?
Before we get there, let's back up. So we get to.
You know, I'm laughing because
we get to Habanero. There's no building for us to stay in. I remember it was myself and probably there was another staff sergeant that was with us. You know who it is, but I won't call any names. But we slept outside on our duffel bags and our rucksacks the first night. And I remember SEAL Team 5 came out. We were right beside their dorm. They came out and was like, you guys are crazy. I can't believe you slept out here all night.
Because there was mortar fire.
There was mortar fire.
RPGs.
Scorpions all over the place.
Oh, yeah, I remember the scorpions.
Camel spiders.
Not
like
they're not poisonous, but still. Yeah.
And they're not big like you see on the... But they're big, but they're not. They don't look like Alaskan king crabs. They're crazy. I can't believe.
Where were the SEALs sleeping at?
They had a building.
Oh, you damn right they had a building. You SEALs.
They actually had 4 buildings that they occupied. They gave us 2 of their buildings because they weren't using them and had no plans to use them. So they told us that morning, you guys, please, you're more than welcome to stay in these 2 buildings right here. He said, they've been cleared, but it's been a while. I don't know what's in them, but walk through, see what you got, and you're more than welcome to. And we'll get you guys set up with water because remember, there's no wells. You got a big tank outside and a pump so you can have a shower and all that kind of stuff. But they hooked us up. They hooked us up when we first got there until we got our permanent dorms. Because remember, the unit that we were replacing had not pulled out yet. The intel that we were getting were... Our basic mission at that time was to do route clearance for the convoys, supply convoys.
Not to interrupt, but you got broken up for your original unit, 101st, 109th,
yeah,
right?
we were shifted over to the 110th.
And that's active duty, or is that
No, it's National Guard.
Okay. And to support them running missions.
Route clearance. So the 110th had tanks. We had Bradleys. Along with the Bradleys, we have dismounts. For route clearance, we really didn't need dismounted personnel that they considered. So they took a lot of our dismounts and stuck them in tanks, which they were not qualified for. Because keep in mind, the whole purpose of train up is to get nothing to do with tanks. Next thing we know, our guys are sitting in tanks. We had some guys that were driving tanks. We had some guys that were gunners.
Loaders.
There was drivers, there was loaders, and there was gunners. None of our guys had ever been trained on any of this stuff. Our guys, the morale just went down the tubes. You got to put yourself in that position. You're trained to do a job, and you're excited about it, and then all of a sudden, right before you open that door, you can't go. You're not going to be doing that. But yeah.
It walks up in the next one, and we spoke about it last night. I'll just say the word, and it's Route Michigan. And take as long as you can.
Dangerous highway in the world at the time, by far.
What do you
deadliest,
What do you remember the most out of it?
Trash.
Trash on
trash. IEDs, dust, trash.
You couldn't identify them, could you?
Sometimes you could, sometimes you couldn't. But keep in mind, we had thermals on our vehicles, so you could pick up the heat signature.
And you could detonate. The audience, you could detonate. ROE says, I'm just gonna put it out there. Someone planting a weapon in the ground. What does ROE state?
The ROE was very loose. It was down to a point if we actually saw someone.
And I'm sorry, not to interrupt. ROE stands for Rules of Engagement.
Rules of Engagement. It was basically if you saw any personnel with a weapon in their hand, a shovel, because they were most likely digging a hole, you were authorized to use deadly force. Now, that was up to your discretion. We didn't go. We're we're flat out at war.
Why do you think that sometimes they have to wait for clearance? Is it because they don't know? Obviously, number one reason is collateral damage, right?
Collateral damage. You got a lot of civilian personnel around, but keep in mind too, the Iraqi war. You weren't fighting against an army. You were fighting against civilians on the battlefield. If you know what I mean. Right. There was no uniform. We were the uniform personnel. They didn't have uniforms unless it was an elite Al Qaeda group that usually had all black on or something like that. But most of our enemies, 90% of the guys that were attacking us were in plain clothes, not like we wear, but what the Iraqis would wear. Right. If you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely. First man that went down. It's up to you if you want to address who it was.
Yep.
How do you? What was going through your mind? I know you were there.
Staff Sergeant Ryan Ostrom, good friend. Knew his dad, knew his whole family.
Can you explain to the audience what happened? If you remember the moment and timeline and everything.
I was Habanea. I'm trying to think. That morning, we were both going out on missions from Habanea. He was part of a tank crew. He was a loader. And keep in mind, a loader, that's not his only job, is loading what rounds in that gun. But he also has a 240 that's mounted on top of his turret. Basically no cover. So you got to come up out of your turret to fire this weapon. So he was a gunner. A loader. And I remember seeing him that morning. Early that morning, we got up. I was brushing my teeth. I come down the hallway. He was actually going to the latrine bathroom for people that don't know what that is. And we were kind of joking around because our food at Habanea was terrible. We would get Mermites. Mermites is basically
I remember
a big aluminum can.
It's green.
It's green on the outside. It's almost like a cooler, but they put hot water in the bottom, and then they put these little segment units inside to keep the food warm or cold if they needed to. But like our salad would be rotten. You pull the cover.
I've been there.
Fruit was rotten. The food was terrible. So the running joke that day was, hey man, I shook his hand, gave him a fist bump. I said, hey, I'll see you this evening. Dinner on me.
You're right.
That was our joke. I'd say probably, I think it was about 4 or 5 hours after that, we got word that he had been shot by sniper fire, or small arms fire is what they were classifying it at the time, but it was a sniper. We ran down to a Tactical Operations Center, the TOC, and to see what was going on, because I hadn't left to go out yet. It's like, what the heck's going on? Is what we're hearing is true? Yeah, we haven't confirmed yet, but I think he was hit. On my way back out of the Tactical Operations Center, and there was a few of us that were down there that actually saw him. They had him back on base. Charlie Med, which is basically our rescue squad, but Charlie Med had gone out and picked him up. He never knew what hit him. And I won't go into details, but he was gone. And right there, every man and woman that was on the ground around that area or knew him, the men became men and the women became hardcore women, because now it's true. It hit you right in the face. Especially for us, because we've known this guy forever. Yeah. Now he's gone. This is no longer a joke. Not that we thought it was a joke at first, but you got a lot of young guys in the unit. You know how they joke around and whatnot. Sure. All that became nonchalant. It was gone. You grew up real quick. Yeah. And then hour after that, now I got to gather up my guys and say, hey, we got to go out. How do you think they felt about that? Yeah. You just lost a good friend. He's dead and gone. Now you got to go out in the same area. because they didn't get that guy when he got shot. He shot from a mosque.
Now, and it leads me into my next thing. Can you explain for the next like minute or two about like people think they're just Iraqi or Al Qaeda, but they bring in snipers from all over the place.
Yeah.
And do you mind spending a minute or two about where they came from and things of that nature?
Well, I can say that a lot of their snipers were not Iraqis. Iraqis, in my opinion, cannot shoot. Most of the guys that they brought in are from other countries such as Czechoslovakia, Syria. I believe there was a couple of guys down there from Russia, but they would actually hire and give these guys a bounty for every soldier that they would take out. And most of these guys knew how to shoot. They didn't have up-to-date weapons in most cases, but they knew how to shoot. They were expert marksmen, and they were good at what they did. They were good at cover and concealment. You walking out through neighborhoods, they could be anywhere. They'd be sitting back in the back of a building 3 floors up with the crosshairs on you. You never know it. You never see them. And when they fired, you would never know where they fired from other than the sound in most cases. You had no idea. But these guys were very highly trained, and they were getting paid big bucks. I mean, I think some of the bounties out there were like, and keep in mind, Iraqis are very poor. So, you give a guy $100, that's a lot of money in their hands. But some of these bounties were like 10,000 a head,
Spoke about him. And they found that sniper, right?
Yep, they found him eventually.
And they killed him.
Yep.
It was that due to, do you think, intelligence from the Iraqis, or do you think that was where do you? I mean, it doesn't matter, but I mean, it's.
I don't know, and my speculation on that is that he was working for.
But to take a shot like that,
Al-Qaeda.
it was at night, right?
Yeah.
So do you have to? Wouldn't you think that sniper had some?
No. It wasn't at night. It was middle of the day.
It was middle of the day. Okay, okay. Make sure we're clear. Yeah. And you think that shot came from far?
I would say so, because talking to some of the personnel that was with Ostrom, they said they could very faint shot rung out, but I don't think it was that far away. But keep in mind, you're in that tank, that M1 Abrams. You got a Bose headphone system. It's a noise canceling. It's basically to protect your ears. It's a hearing protection, but also a headset combo. So that shot rung out. It may have been closer than what they thought, but with all the hearing protection that they had on it, it may have not. That just kind of skewed everything and made it seem like it was further away. But judging by the angle that he was hit and the trajectory, all that good stuff, they were thinking that it probably came from a mosque, which was in that sector. They were operating in Delta sector that day. Never forget it.
That happened. Then you moved to Ramadi, correct?
Yes.
And why did y'all have to leave Ramadi?
We left Ramadi because...
Or leave Habanea,
left Habanea because Ramadi was losing a ton of guys. And what really made that move is we lost, from our original unit, the 109th, we lost 5 guys from an IED explosion.
And that was a Bradley?
That was on a Bradley.
Do you mind speaking about that? What happened in that? That was on Route Michigan?
That was on...
Or not Route Michigan, though.
No, it wasn't Route Michigan. I don't know for sure. I'm not going to speak on it.
You don't have to speak on it, but just...
But I will explain what happened. Basically, they were patrolling their sector up there in a Bradley. They had, I believe, 2 dismounts in the back, and then their driver, their gunner,
and the BC, the Bradley commander.
Yeah. So they were sitting on a intersection. Had no idea that intersection was double stacked with an IED. What I mean by double stacked, there was multiple rounds buried in the ground waiting to be triggered.
What kind of? We're talking about what kind of round?
At least 155.
There had to be 2, right? And you said
because
when I say double stack, people don't.
It was more than 2, in my opinion. And again, I don't know the grand details of it, but when that went off, it was That was it.
I think everybody in Ramadi in that time and that the whole sector knew about that.
Yeah, everybody.
Even the Navy SEALs, everyone.
I'll just put it this way: you saw it for a couple of days after it happened,
and everybody in the news, and everybody knew about that. Yeah.
That was tragic. Again, just a couple of weeks before that, we lost Ostrom, and now.
And the people don't understand. I remember we had a rocket that when I was in Baghdad in the Green Zone. We stayed there for a little bit after we got back from Fallujah. We stayed there, and a rocket came in, and we had vehicles, and people don't understand this. Luckily, there was nobody. This is a rocket that came and hit 4 or 5 vehicles.
Right.
We had grenades in there.
Yep.
We had AT-4s in there. We had 50 cal rounds in there. Mark 19 rounds in there. You can't run into those vehicles.
No.
But you cannot run up to that Bradley and try to save anybody. And I don't mean to be like descriptive, but people don't. A lot of the audience does not understand when something like that happens.
You got a combat load on a Bradley, so you're talking hundreds of rounds of HE, high explosive rounds. And I don't know if it's hard to explain what a 25 mic, how big a round is. I'd say probably like.
No, it's big. It's like
it's about the size of a.
You say liquor bottle almost.
No, it's not that big. It's about the size of an old Pepsi bottle. You remember the old Pepsis?
Oh yeah.
It's about that size. To give you some kind of
context, right.
Look it up if you're really curious. 25 mic. But anyway, you got a battle combat load. You got tows in that vehicle.
Tows, 2 tows, right?
Yes.
And tow missiles.
Yes.
It's a missile.
It's a wire-guided missile, and very, very powerful. It's basically a tank killer. It was, matter of fact, a lot of people don't know this. A little bit of history here. Desert Storm, that Bradley killed more tank vehicles than the M1 Abrams because of that tow system. That's just a little bit of fact to throw at you. But so you got tows in that vehicle. You got small arms rounds in that vehicle. Yeah, you can't run up and do anything about that. That was a tragic event, but that's what pulled us back into Ramadi, because they were hurting. They needed more personnel. We were losing a lot of, not just us, but other units that were working out of Ramadi. They were losing a lot of guys.
Right. So you already touched on it, but if I don't want to rewind, but personally for you, do you remember your first combat experience where you had to, because I did the statistics, there's only 1% of the United States over history that served in the U.S. military. Out of that percentage, I worked in the Pentagon, I looked around at the people that were Army officers, and I asked people I work for, I said, I'm looking at lieutenant colonel and full-blood colonels in the Army, why don't they have a combat patch on? This is recently, in the last few years. And someone told me they dodge. They take assignments. And so being someone, you wouldn't want to go in there.
So
you understand what I'm talking about?
I'll say this.
You get it, right?
Everybody has a job in the military. Everybody's got a job. Whether you're finance, whether you're a cook, whether you are a small arms repair guy, whatever you want to call it, whatever MOS you have in all branches, it serves a purpose, and I honor that. Now, are there some guys out there that dodge that, going to combat? Absolutely, I'm sure it is. Just like there's some civilians out there that definitely, I'm not joining the military. I'm not going to war. Whatever. Yeah, no, but hey, that's fine, because it's not for everybody. You
said that last time we interviewed.
Yeah.
You're right. You said that. You made a good point. That's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody, and I respect that. Same thing I told my older kids. My youngest son came to me and said he wanted to join the military. It's not for everybody, but I thought it would have been a good fit for him, because he loved that.
It's a camaraderie, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. It's almost like being part of a football team.
Yeah.
Or basketball, whatever sport you want to call it. But it's not for everybody. But going back to that, every MOS serves a purpose. Just remember, infantry, everybody, every MOS supports infantry. Look it up.
Hey, so we will get into it.
That's a true fact. I just want to make sure we'll break up the little bit of monotony here.
I know.
Every MOS in the military supports infantry.
This is between Habanea and. This was between Habanea and when you're transitioning to Ramadi. You were in there for support. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Okay. What happened on December 9th of 2005?
So on that day, we were doing a pretty special mission. We got intel that some Al Qaeda members were operating in a certain sector. They give us grid coordinates. You know, we look at the map, go out, do your research on the map, and figure out your patrols, blah blah blah. But anyway, we did all of that, and we woke up that morning. Hey, going out here, we're gonna try to go to some houses, talk to people, and that's how we, find out who's been coming in. Al Qaeda been here, whatever. If they would talk to us, you see any strange activity, that kind of thing. So we were doing our normal deal. We knew that we could probably meet resistance on this mission. So we headed out. We staged, let off the ground troops. They started doing their foot patrols. And keep in mind, I was a Bradley commander. I was in charge of the Bradley element because our LT was on the ground with the troops.
How many Bradleys were with you? This is dismount.
Four Bradleys.
And there's about how many dismounted are we talking about? You think?
Probably at least 30 to 35 guys altogether.
And they all dismounted out the Bradleys.
Yeah. So they had dismounted. Our Bradleys had staged in the overwatch position. Basically, overwatch position is we're looking on the flank side of their movement. We're kind of covering them as they move through toward where they were going to. While we were sitting in our position, which was right across from a canal, irrigation canal, and this canal is pretty big. It's probably about 15 feet wide, maybe more, and probably about 10, 15 feet deep. There was a little bridge, which I briefed my guys. I said, if we have to rush across for closer support, I said, that's our ticket right there. I said, but keep in mind, with the weight of our vehicles, that bridge may collapse, and it was very narrow. But I felt confident because I zoomed in with the our vision, our optics, and looked at the structure. I was like, I think we can get across there. Worst case, we'll drive down in the canal, which it was dry. I said, we'll drive down in the canal and climb out and get closer support if needed. That was like our contingency plan. Well, upon scanning, some of their SOPs was to send out fake IEDs. Basically, the reason for that is you see that.
They want you to react to that.
They want you to react to that. But while you're reacting to that, because they weren't dumb. They may have been illiterate, which they were, some of them. That you see that fake ID, they knew that when we saw that, we would stop in most cases. We did two things most of the time. We would stop or we would blow through and gather a perimeter around it and call it in. Well, this day we were already there. We had already staged. I'm scanning. My gunner is scanning. He's like, oh, what's that? We zoom in on it. It's a round. It looks like a rocket round sitting on the dirt. Didn't look real. So I called up to hire. Said, hey, gave him my grid location. May want to send out EOD. Explosive Ordnance Department, which is usually Marines or Navy. So they sent out EOD. Sometimes that takes forever, but
it takes forever. When I was there,
it's like 3 hours. You might be sitting there. That's just why before we would just detonate ourselves. So we waited for EOD. They showed up like 30, 40 minutes later because we weren't too far from base. And this was middle of the day, probably about 11 o'clock in the morning. They show up. They're shorthanded. All our ground troops are occupied. They're in position. So I got with their commander of their element. I said, hey, my gunner can man the gun. And I said, I got other NCOs that can take care of the Bradleys. I said, I'll dismount with you guys. We'll go across, do what we need to do to clear this and, continue on. So I dismounted. I remember taking a picture with this one guy because they were looking at my 231 that I modified. It's like, oh, that's cool, blah, blah, blah. So we took a picture together. I never knew what happened to that picture either, but maybe somebody hearing this will say, hey, I got it. But
we'll get it for you.
Anyway, they took a picture of us two. So we proceeded across. We sat down, developed a plan, kind of drew it out on the ground because we had time, what we're going to do. So we decided that we were not going to walk across the little bridge that was going across the canal. We're going to walk down in the canal, get up on top, get a closer eye on things, and then we'll deploy the little robot because there was a lot of weeds down in the canal. We figured that the robot would get stuck down in there. So got down in the canal. The first guy walks down in. He's starting to crest back up on top. Second guy goes down in, and we're about 15 meters apart, 10, 15 meters apart. The guy in front of me, which is the third guy, he steps down in, which is the same guy that took a picture with me, by the way. Papa Seal is his last name. He walked down in the canal, and next thing you know, all I see is like a white screen. Like if you're watching your TV and the screen goes completely white, that's what I see. My eyelids is like, I don't know if they're closed or not. Then I hear this loud boom, and then my ears are ringing. It's just like high-pitched ring. I feel this pressure, I'm on the ground. When I open my eyes and I finally come through, I look up. All I see is the sky. I was like, oh, man, I've been hit. Didn't feel anything. My ears are hurting. Had dust all in my face. So I'm like spitting dust, patting myself down. I found my weapon, which was still beside me. I grabbed that. My ears are still ringing because I can't hear anything. Finally, that kind of dies down a little bit, and I hear the guys that are already gone across. They're calling for Papa Seal. His nickname was Pop. Hey, Pop, where are you, Pop? Well, Pop was right in front of me. He's gone. Completely gone. So after the dust clears, now we're starting to receive small arms fire. That was another standard procedure that they would do to us. They would detonate these IEDs, and then they would start firing upon us. So now they're shooting at us. We don't know I can't tell where the rounds are coming from. I could see the dust popping here and there. They're shooting at us. Still can't find Pop. I'm down in the canal. I kind of look back behind us where we come from towards the Bradleys. I see 2 boots sticking up, kind of face down, like he's laying face down. It's like, oh man, he's still knocked out. So I yelled out, I said, I see Pop, I got Pop. So I ran up, I grabbed him, pulled him back down the canal, because keep in mind, we're still receiving small arms fire. I pull him down in the canal with me, and I reach and pull him over, and he was done.
He's gone.
I won't go into details.
He's gone.
So that's what that day is about.
And it's a memory to you that means a lot to you because you thought to the actual date wrong. But no, what's important is that before we started this, you said that because today is yesterday.
Yeah. It was the anniversary yesterday.
And you told me prior to this that could have been you.
Definitely.
Or it should have been you.
Yeah. Definitely. That was a day that made me sit back. At the time, I was still mission focused, but when you get back to your base and you kind of winding down, you start thinking about that stuff, and it's like that very well could have been me. I mean, he was just inches and feet in front of me, and he took shrapnel that could have hit me. So that day, I'll never forget. Man, and that's not the only day, but that's one day that was really close. And there's been other times where I've been danger close to many things, over there. Many things. I've even taken a knee on the IED.
What's a daisy chain to you?
Basically, they set up a row or a series of IEDs. They're connected in series. And on a roadside, just think of going down the road, and every 100 feet, there's an explosive device. They're all connected. So when they detonate one, they all go off, or they're supposed to. That day, we pulled back. I'll never forget. It's me and my buddy Packer. Now, it's not the first time we've been in that situation either. But anyway, we pulled back, got off the road. And no soon as we got off the hard top of that road, they detonated the first IED. The others didn't go off.
There's 3 types, in my opinion. You have IEDs in the road. You have V-beds,
Yep.
where vehicle-borne explosive devices. And then you have suicide bombers.
Yep.
Can you break it down?
Absolutely. They all will kill you.
No, I know.
It's not to be funny, but
No, it's not funny, but it's good to laugh. That's what you laugh at. I mean,
it started out an IED. That's what they first started.
Improvised explosive device.
Improvised explosive device. That was basically, we'll put this on the roadside because they see us traveling, they see us walking. They'll put up a plastic bag. And keep in mind, there's a lot of trash in Iraq. There's trash everywhere. They don't have a trash pickup system. There's a lot of trash. So what they would do, they'd see a convoy going by. It's like, we need a marking device.
Right.
When that Humvee hits this point here, if I put an IED here, it should hit just right, depending on how fast they're
And
going.
how fast could I blow up to give context to the audience, everybody wants to know what could that do to a vehicle, or if it's placed properly.
If it's placed properly, you'll see wheels and axles and engine parts flying through the air.
And everybody inside will probably get killed.
Done. Yeah. So that's an IED. Your V-bids. Just think of someone driving a Honda, Honda Civic.
And they modify it. They put like 6 or 7 rounds in there.
Or a Honda Accord.
And they put like 6 or 7 155
Well,
rounds.
they'll go a little bit further. So they got smart. So they used to just put them in the trunk. But then we could see it coming. It's like car going down the road. The front end is sticking up, and the ass is dragging, creating sparks.
Yeah.
Well, they got smart. They started putting them midway of the vehicle, like in the floor behind the front seats. And then they got smart and said, well, we'll do a little trap door where we can just pull up right beside a military vehicle. We can hit a button. That trap door opens up. The device is all ready to go. It drops on the ground. We pull off. Boom. They use washing machine timers to detonate. They'll use cell phones to detonate. Yes, they had cell phones, but they would connect cell phones.
Pagers too, right? Pagers, garage door opens, everything.
Whatever, anything electronic that sends a signal. TV remote. All he needed was a signal to activate a charge. And that charge detonated the actual explosive device. But that's a V-bid.
And then you have the last one.
And then you have
Suicide
bombers.
Have you experienced them?
Now, keep in mind, they're the clothing that they wear in that country, and I'm not making fun of what they wear, but I'm just making a point. A lot of their stuff is very loose fitting, what we used to call man dresses, but they would actually lace themselves with explosive devices, and I'm sure the audience out there seen this on TV.
They know.
And they have a trigger device in their hand or somewhere on their body where they could just tap, and they explode themselves. And shrapnel, it's embedded with nails or metal, and it just goes everywhere.
And I asked a guy in Clubhouse the other day, and I'm not to interrupt you, but I want you to make a distinction, because a movie came out about American Sniper.
Yep.
Would you find, not that you experienced it, that people would use their children as a device?
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying to agree with the movie, but like this interview is more important than, not saying every interview I do is important, but this gives distinction And the best way I can put it is not in context, but it basically says you've seen people use children to kill Americans.
Absolutely. Yep. It's like their sacrifice. Yep. No doubt.
Wow.
No doubt. And then you have one more I've seen over there. Sheep herders. They would actually put satchels on sheep. Now, I'm talking like a herd of sheep, 300 plus, walking across wherever, and they'll cross the road, and they'll get to that ditch, and the old shepherd would come up there with his little cane and yank on that little string, and they would drop down in the ditch, and nobody never see it because you got hundreds of sheep just gag along, eating or whatever. And then when that convoy comes through, his trigger man's sitting there waiting. He could be sitting 50 feet away. He could be sitting 400 yards away, or 400 meters, we would say in the military, to trigger that device.
There's a lot of people that don't like the fact that we went in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, I understand that.
And I hear it. What do you say to the point of this conversation? But like, let's keep it real, right?
I tell them, show me facts. What are you talking about? Show me the facts. I don't want to hear your opinion. Your opinion is important, but show me the facts. Regardless, that was my order to go do what I had to do in Iraq and anywhere else I got orders to go. I signed up for the military, and I had to follow that order.
I had a dinner with this guy. He's upstate New York, and his blood was all over the floor. He got shot in the face by a sniper, and he died. And that showed our command that you could put people on tower guard all you want. That's not going to stop what these people are trying to do. No.
And that wasn't the first time that happened either.
Like you could go out and get blown up by IEDs, but you don't think people take shots at like simple shots at people?
Yep. Well, you got that soldier who's,
and you know the experience I'm talking about.
Yeah, you got that soldier who's pulling guard like that every day for multiple hours a day. You become complacent. You have cover, but sometimes you become complacent, and that sniper, all he needs is just that little quarter of an inch.
Second, right?
Yeah.
The second. Less than a second.
He just need that second and that quarter of an inch to place his shot. That's it. And like I said, your soldiers get out there and they become complacent. But, you kind of in between a rock and a hard place because you don't have personnel in most cases to swap those guys out and, give them a break because we were already undermanned to begin with. We were fighting for numbers the whole time. But it happened. It happened.
So overall, what do you feel like? What'd you take home with you in terms of all that? It's a lot you took home.
There's a lot to take home, but the one important thing that I took home is if I can make it through this, I can do anything. And I can endure anything.
We're getting close to the end, but this is the one that, in the end, it's kind of frustrating. So, February 2006, right?
Yep. I know what you're talking about.
You were there.
Yep.
Do you mind sharing?
Sure. I won't call any names, but
no.
So
this is in late February of 06.
Late February. So basically, we were doing a night mission. Pretty much just monitoring activity throughout the neighborhood outside of Blue Diamond. And keep in mind, at this point, we were doing 2 patrols a
And
day.
this is Ramadi.
No.
This is a Ramadi Blue Diamond, right?
Yeah, Ramadi Blue Diamond. Blue Diamond is, correct me if I'm wrong, Uday's, Saddam Hussein's son's palace. We took it over, created a base out of there. But anyway, we were doing night missions out of there. This was our night mission. We'd already done a day mission. 2 foot patrols a day. Pretty demanding. Because you had time to get up, eat breakfast, do your mission, come back, eat lunch, take a nap, and hit the ground again about 5 that evening to do your night mission. Well, this is our night mission. So we got an element. We're going out, basically just gathering intel. And we're working right off of Route Duster. Route Duster was by far the deadliest highway in the world at that time, because it was just laced with IEDs. Many soldiers have lost their lives on this highway, blah, blah, blah. So we're doing our foot patrol, and we're just about, we're on our way back to base. We usually we would walk out about 6 miles or more and then do a big loop and come back. Well, we decided to stop at this one house. Got some intel that guy had been seeing some activity, blah, you know. So we stopped, talked to the guy, and our standard operating procedure was, if we were stopping at a house, we had part of our element to get on the roofs of houses and take cover and cover, you know, give us overwatch. So that's what they were doing. That night we had a Marine with us. One Marine. He was just somebody we picked up. We needed an extra guy. He was floating around. So yeah, come on, go with us. Good dude. He at the time there was a curfew, 10 o'clock at night, 10 p.m., 2200 hours, if you want to go military time. Nobody was to be out unless they had special permission, or they were going to a job, which was very seldom over there. But that was a curfew. So we set up on this house. Myself, my LT, and squad leader was in the house. We left the rest of the guys out. They're doing their thing. Well, all of a sudden we heard these shots ring out. Had a 249 open up, and we heard a couple of M16s open up. We yelled out, "Hey, what's going on? Yeah, we got some guy trying to, you know, sneak up on us here, coming up through the canal." I think it was 2 guys, but I think we hit one. So we get out there. Sure enough, shot a guy. He's laying up on the canal. Our medic comes up, tries to give him aid. He's shot in the chest on the right side, 1 hole. And I'll get to that. Remember that. There's 1 bullet hole in the chest, upper chest right here. Remember that number. So we get this guy kind of stabilized. We call for Charlie Med. Because of the area that we're in was so hot, they wouldn't come down. Charlie Med, again, is our medical ambulance, basically, in civilian world. They wouldn't touch it. No, we can't come. Can you bring him out to us? I said, this is the foot patrol. You're about at least a good 3/4 of a mile from our position to the safest checkpoint. So we did. The guy that we were talking to in that house, we grabbed his vehicle, grabbed that guy. Me and the interpreter loaded up the guy that we shot, put him in the back with the car owner, and drove him up to the checkpoint. Right. Now, I'm in an Iraqi car. After curfew, there's an M1 Abrams sitting up on this checkpoint.
I remember you talking about that.
I'm calling up on the radio, "Hey, let this element know on this checkpoint that there is a military..."
You're coming through big casualty.
Yeah.
Number 1,
we get him out of the car. He dies once we take him out. Charlie Med meets us there. They're like, "Well, we're not going to take him. He's already passed away." They checked his vitals. He was done. So we get back in the car and started heading back. The car gives out of gas. We're about at least a half a mile from our element. Anyway, me and the interpreter unasked the car, left the guy there with his car. Now I'm getting radio traffic from air support. Hey, we got some hot spots. Now, hot spots mean they see people moving in on the thermals. There's people. So we get back. Eventually we get back. It's hot. But they're saying enemy personnel creeping in on us. Well, we get back. I got my IR strobe light on. I said, identify myself. I get back to the element. We get back to base. We did our debrief, explained to them what happened. Next thing you know, I go on leave. I come back from leave, and I find out that we are now under investigation for a bad shoot. So they call it. So I was like, okay. I remember our platoon sergeant at the time, he actually pulled me in. He was like, hey, I want you to tell me what happened that night and be honest. I was like, I looked at him. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, this has already been wrote down. I was like, look at the debrief. What was in that debrief is exactly what happened. And it just like they already had made up their mind that somehow we had made a bad shoot and then tried to cover it up or something like that. Our first sergeant at the time was really pushing it. He thought that we had did something illegal. We shot this guy illegally, and his words was, we're going to prosecute you guys and you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail, blah, blah, blah. CID then reports that everything that they have gathered, they cannot come up with anything that we did wrong. This soldier shot this guy with the saw gun.
Yeah.
Remember I said the saw gunner open up 3 to 5 round bursts. Keep in mind, he's been trained on this weapon. So I stayed back with him. They sent us back to main base Ramadi. Stayed with him. And then they called in the prosecutor and the lawyers. CID came back again. And they basically held our whole element. All the guys that were involved in this, they held us back for another 2 weeks, trying to pinpoint what was going on. Eventually, they released us all except 2 individuals. And again, I won't call any names. They ended up going to Baghdad to a trial, and the trial was dismissed.
By
Colonel. Remember, I was on the phone because I had to call in. They gave me a security code to call in, block the whole 9 yards. I called in during the trial. And I remember hearing the judge going, why is this in my courtroom? Basically, the charges were dismissed. Our commander for that unit, the first sergeant, all of us have been knowing each other been knowing these guys since 95. This is now 2006. Used to hang out, go eat dinner together, eat lunch together, go hunting together, all kinds of stuff. And they threw us under the bus because they thought we were trying to cover up a bad shoot.
To go through something that you almost like, your life is done.
Well,
and how you come back from all that.
I'll see if I can break it down. We'll go from before you get there, you're scared, you're worried, you're wondering what's going to go down, you're wondering where you're going to be, what it's going to be like. You get there, and while you're standing there in the chow line, and you see Charlie Med bringing in injured soldiers, dead or alive. Now you're scared. You're wondering when your number's going to get pulled. And then you reach to a point where I'm over that. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Nothing I can do about it. I just got to fight to stay alive. And then you get to a point, and I may be missing some phases, but you get to a point where you start thinking about going home. And that's when the soldier becomes complacent because he forgets about what he needs to do to stay alive. And then you get to a point where you get that date and you're going home. Oh, sometimes this happens. You get that date, you're going home, and oh, it's been extended. That really hurts. And you keep in mind, you got soldiers of all ages. You got soldiers that are fresh out of high school, and you got soldiers that are in their 30s and 40s, some 50s. You got to work on that morale across a broad range of an age group. But like I said, I may have missed some stages, but that's basically what I remember when I was there on any deployment or any conflict. That's what usually goes down.
Anything you want to share before we shut it down?
Nope. It's always an honor to be part of this. And I feel that, me telling my story, maybe it'll help another soldier out there open up. And, everybody's different. But if anything, someone can get an enjoyment out of this, or somebody can say, you don't know what he's talking about, whatever the case may be. But, it's an honor, Jake. I appreciate you reaching out, allowing me to share my experiences of my military career. And like I said, it's the first thing I said in the beginning, the motto, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I feel that I'm definitely stronger now than I was back then. And I feel like I can do anything, which is why I'm where I am today. I've only just started. The skies are opening, and I'm out there to take advantage of it.
Right. And,
like, to get back to your point, people just don't understand, especially the younger people today, and some older, they have no idea. I hate people that complain. I shouldn't say hate. I don't like to be around people that complain, because there's nothing to complain about in my eyes in the United States compared to other places that I've been. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So, again, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. Now, I'm not saying we all don't have our struggles, we don't have our battles, because you're going to have that regardless. You just got to overcome that situation and defeat it, put it to bed so it doesn't come back, and move on. And that's how I've been operating for quite some time now. And it took me a long time to realize that, I'll be honest. But as you get older, you should be getting wiser. And then you start to see a lot of the crazy stuff that's going on today. That's another topic. But I wake up in the morning, and it's all about supporting my family and making sure they're happy. And then
you've been through a lot.
Go from there.
You've been through a lot. You've been through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
but I look at it this way: I may have been through a lot, but there's a lot of people out there that's been through a lot more than I have. But that's.
You made it back to America.
I made it back, yes. Yep. And like I said before, I would do it again if I had to. if it's about keeping my kids free and allow them to do the things that they like to do, the freedom to watch what they want to watch on TV, worship whatever they want to worship. That's what it's all about. No, I shouldn't say worship whatever they want to worship, but, you know, but just the freedom to do whatever they want. They go to college, they can go to the military if they want. And I don't discourage. Just like my youngest son, I did not tell him one time, no, you're not doing the military. However, I did say this. I said, I remember he went to college, and he was honest. He's like, he came home for Thanksgiving that first semester. He's like, Dad, I'm not going back in the fall or in the spring. I was like, okay, what's going on?
We got to talk about that.
And he was kind of scared.
Why?
Well, just he knew, he knows Dad. He thought I was going to, you know.
Yeah, whip his ass.
Understand it, because I was in the same situation. But I told him, I looked him right in the eye. I remember we were down in the basement. He's like, I'm not going back in the spring. I was like, okay. And it kind of caught him off guard, because he was expecting me to just go off, you know. What do you mean? You know, I was like, all right, what's going on? He's like, I don't like it. He said, I can't stand the people that I'm around. He's like, I can't focus in class, and I feel like I'm wasting my time. I said, okay, so you know my saying, what if you give up on something, what's your secondary plan? He's like, yep, I knew you were going to say that. He's like, I want to do the military. I said, all right, nothing wrong with that. And I looked at him, man, in the eye, face to face, and I said, you got two choices. He's like, what's that? I said, you can either do Air Force or Navy. Yeah. He's like, but Dad, you were Army. I was like, I know. Trust me. If you're going to do the military, at least, and I'm not saying the Army can't provide this for you, but knowing you, and I've raised you, I think the Air Force will be a perfect fit for you.
Wow. Thank you, Master Sergeant Martin, for that powerful share. And thank you all again for taking the time to listen. I want to say, if you all know a veteran or a combat veteran, just, you know, ask them, like, how are they doing? I think we all hear so common the fact that people say, thank you for your service. Thank you for, I mean, that's, you know, we appreciate that. Right. But I believe, like, if you do have a personal relationship or, you know, a friendship with someone that served, it's comforting to hear, like, how are you doing, you know, every once in a while. And I think that will go a lot further. So just again, please be sure to listen to AllInMotion on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and many more. Stay tuned for many amazing guests. I have a lot of things coming up, and we didn't leave. We're back. We've always been here. But just want to let y'all know that thank you all again for those that do tune in. And this is Jake from AllInMotion. Take care and be safe.